America ridiculously claims to have a First Amendment regarding free speech. Here is the joke amendment. Comedians must have thought it up. First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Here's why the First Amendment is literally farcical. Fort Harrison said, in the wake of the January 6, 2021, unrest at the United States Capitol building and several social media outlets suspending President Trump's accounts, free speech is a hot topic. Although the right to free speech is ingrained into American life, free speech is not absolute. Right there, you're in incredibly serious trouble. If free speech is not absolute, then it is relative. Relative to what? Now you have something contrary to absolute free speech that can be gamed to more or less shut down free speech entirely. Who guards the guards, and who gets to decide what is allowed under free speech and what isn't? Are you consulted? You can be 100% sure, you will not be consulted and you will have no say in any of this. So much for your free speech. Fort Harrison said, the constitutional right to free speech is not implicated by the actions of these private social media platforms because they are private entities, not arms of the government. And right there is where free speech absolutely collapses. Private corporations have been given the absolute right by Congress to suppress, block and oppose free speech. How can Congress claim to support free speech when it endorses corporations that have no respect for free speech at all and are, by their clear actions, wholly opposed to it? Fort Harrison said, moreover, the First Amendment does not protect certain speech intended to incite or produce violence and lawless action. And who gets to decide such things? Not you. Never you. If you oppose an illegal government, that government will jail you, and it will claim you incited lawless action against it. Well, that's the whole point. Who decides the legitimacy of an illegal government? Fort Harrison said, to be sure, free speech is an immutable right protected by the First Amendment, which provides that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Well, it's self-evidently not immutable. It's the very definition of mutability. If you exercise your immutable right to free speech and are cancelled, deplatformed and prosecuted, in what sense did you ever have free speech? You had incredibly restricted speech. You were at all times operating in a system of extreme censorship, merely pretending to support free speech. Fort Harrison said, but the right to free speech ends where it begins, with the plain language of the Constitution which guarantees it. The First Amendment only prohibits Congress, the legislative branch of the United States government, from abridging the right to free speech. This is where the farce is fully exposed. If the American government does not restrict free speech but the American corporatocracy 100% restricts it, in what way does it make any sense at all to claim that Congress is not abridging the right to free speech? By its act of omission, not commission, it is making it impossible for Americans to have any practical right of free speech. If you are cancelled and deplatformed by the corporatocracy, not by Congress, every time you exercise your supposed right to free speech, in what way would you feel inclined to thank Congress? If you were sane, you would be 100% blaming Congress and the Supreme Court for taking no action to compel the unelected corporatocracy of the super-rich elite to respect free speech. Fort Harrison said, this prohibition has since been made applicable to state and local governments through the 14th Amendment, and generally prohibits government interference with free speech rights. It's irrelevant that government generally doesn't interfere with free speech rights given that the corporatocracy interferes with them at all times. Fort Harrison said, the First Amendment does not prohibit private individuals, companies and employers from restricting speech. And that's why free speech is a joke in the USA. To all intents and purposes, it is totally suppressed, despised, and opposed. All with the blessing of Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court. Like Pontius Pilate, they claim to support free speech while totally washing their hands of it and letting every private individual, company and employer trample all over it and spit on it. Fort Harrison said, the social media platforms responsible for suspending President Trump's accounts are privately owned and operated, and they are free to limit the content on their sites without implicating the First Amendment. Why are these platforms allowed to act against the First Amendment? No country can, with a straight face, claim to have a First Amendment while allowing every corporation and employer to urinate all over it and ban it. Is this some sort of joke? The hypocrisy is off the scale. The degree of bad faith is astounding. Ford Harrison said, thus, the First Amendment is not implicated in the decisions made by private social media platforms to suspend President Trump's accounts. It is 100% implicated. If the First Amendment had any reality at all as opposed to just being there for show and as a spectacular con, it would be illegal for any corporation in the USA not to have free speech enshrined in its terms of service. Ford Harrison said, moreover, while the First Amendment prohibits government interference with speech that could be deemed hateful, it does not protect illegal and riot-inducing speech. Who decides? We know that the unelected dictatorship of the super-rich, the corporatocracy, will ban anything that it claims is hateful, which is more or less everything which isn't about rainbows, unicorns, puppies and apple pies. Ford Harrison said, as Justice Wendell Holmes Jr. stated more than a century ago, the most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. Is this the most pointless example ever? Why didn't Justice Wendell Holmes Jr. comment on someone on a platform stating that all religions alien to America's history should be declared illegal because they are contrary to American values? Anyone making such a comment would, today, be cancelled and deplatformed by the social media corporatocracy of the super-rich elite. In fact, even as I am saying these things, my mouth is bleeding because I'm having to bite my tongue so much, self-censor, and mangle what I really want to say. I am acutely aware of how little free speech I have. Ford Harrison said, because private companies are not bound by the confines of the First Amendment, private companies generally need not consider it when regulating the content of speech in the workplace or making employment-related decisions, such as discipline, based on an employee's speech. Right here, we have an anti-free speech charter, regarding which Congress and the Supreme Court do less than nothing because they are more than useless. Ford Harrison said, private employers may advise their employees not to speak about politics in the workplace, and they may remove postings from internal and external means of communication that involve political discussion. Well, so much for free speech. You don't have any. You are never allowed to contradict the political beliefs of your employers. When is free speech not free speech? When it's constitutionally protected. Ho! 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 The First Amendment literally says, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. But it is failing to make laws stopping others from abridging the freedom of speech, in which case it is negligent and derelict, and actively supporting the abridgment of free speech in America. By making no laws to stop attacks on free speech, the American government is functionally attacking free speech, contrary to the Constitution. It is allowing the denial of free speech, and that's functionally identical to making laws denying free speech. As far as the First Amendment goes, acts of omission must be considered alongside acts of commission. It is not enough for Congress not to pass laws against free speech, it must also prevent others from passing measures denying free speech, as all private American corporations do. For Congress to fail to take action against free speech denial and suppression is to be actively complicit in denying and suppressing free speech, contrary to the American Constitution. Free speech is experienced as free speech only when it is oppositional, when it expresses criticism of others, and even hatred, and perhaps especially hatred, of others. True free speech is always offensive. No one is enjoying their imagined right to free speech when they are saying how much they love rainbows, puppies, apple pie, and unicorns. After all, who is going to stop you saying any of that? You cannot have free speech in the absence of criticism, hate and offense, and yet these are exactly what are banned by private American corporations. A real Constitution and a real First Amendment would be built into every facet of American life. But America, effectively, has nothing to do with the Constitution and the First Amendment. America, factually, is a plutocratic corporatocracy. Everyone in America is controlled by corporations over which they have no say and no power. No American corporation is required to uphold the American Constitution, yet everyone's lives are shaped by these corporations. The people can't vote out anyone from a corporation. They can't fire Jeff Bezos. They can't do anything to Jeff Bezos. The super rich are untouchable. If the people say anything about Jeff Bezos in books on Amazon's platform, they will immediately be cancelled, because the First Amendment doesn't require anything of Jeff Bezos and Amazon. Bezos can completely ignore the First Amendment. And he does. Gleefully. What is the point of a pointless Constitution and a pointless First Amendment? It's not the government that is going to stop you from exercising your free speech. It's the corporations that actually run America which will do so. The Constitution and the government certainly won't do a single thing to uphold free speech banned by corporations and multi-billionaires such as Jeff Bezos. You have no free speech in a country whose constitution does not apply to your real rulers, the corporatocracy. Where do people go to exercise their free speech? Books and social media. Where do they fall foul of anti-free speech censorship? On corporate publishing platforms and corporate social media. So, free speech is suppressed exactly where people seek to exercise it. If democracy were a great thing, every corporation would be run as a democracy. None is. If free speech were valued by America, every corporation would be required to uphold it. None is. In fact, the vast majority actively penalize free speech, forbid it, and shut it down. People are cancelled for being offensive or hateful. What is free speech if offense and hate are compulsorily removed from it? It is self-evidently limited speech, constrained speech, controlled speech, censored speech. It's anything other than free speech. It's disgusting for the USA to call itself a democratic nation that supports free speech when it is actually an anti-democratic corporatocracy ruled by plutocratic oligarchs who detest and ferociously attack free speech. Above all, you are never allowed to criticize them, your super-rich controllers. An internet meme says, to learn who rules over you, simply find out who you are not allowed to criticize. Well, we all know the answer to that. You're not allowed to question the corporatocracy. And you're not allowed to question absurd religions. Religions are on a par with fiction such as The Lord of the Rings. Imagine a world where people believed in hobbit armies and apocalyptic showdowns with orcs, and wizards making decisive interventions. The Abrahamists believe in messiahs, Gog and Magog, Armageddon, magic blood, promised lands, arcs that communicate with God, sky wizards, and all the rest of it. But you're never allowed to say that this is all insane drivel and that it's crazy for humanity to pretend that these stories have some element of truth. They have none. Yet millions of Muslims believe that the global caliphate is imminent. Millions of Christians believe in the rapture coming real soon. And millions of Jews are expecting the Messiah right about now. Millions of people think that magical events are going to happen. They're not. What's guaranteed is that Jeff Bezos and his fellow unelected oligarchs who run the world are going to get even richer. That's how they've designed the system. Amazon is an anti-free speech totalitarian tyranny, full of Nazi book burners, yet 100% approved by Congress, which, laughably, is supposed to endorse the First Amendment. We have truly entered an Orwellian age. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. Orwell wrote, the idea had even crossed his mind that she might be an agent of the thought police. All of the woke belong to the thought police. It's simply hilarious that America claims to have a First Amendment protecting free speech when not a single American corporation includes the First Amendment in its terms and conditions and will cancel and deplatform you before you can blink if you say anything offensive, i.e., anything real and true. No country on earth is more functionally opposed to free speech than the USA. More people are banned in the USA than anywhere else for daring to say what's on their mind. It's mind-boggling that Americans believe they live in an uncensored society. They're as censored as North Koreans, except it's the corporations, not the government, doing the censoring, canceling and deplatforming. Isn't it amazing how much people love to hate? Is hate the highest expression of love? You certainly hate everything that threatens what you love, don't you? That's why conservative Americans hate woke Americans. But because of America's anti-First Amendment, they get canceled if they express their hate. Orwell wrote, as usual, the face of Emmanuel Goldstein, the enemy of the people, had flashed onto the screen. George Orwell would definitely be cancelled and deplatformed if he were alive today in the USA. All of his books would be banned. Because America detests free speech, and this hatred begins in the White House, Congress and the Supreme Court, which actively conspire with the corporatocracy of the oligarchs and plutocrats to make it impossible for good, decent, hard-working Americans to say what they think.